The Figure in the Mist by Stephen J. Willis. As my eyelids slowly closed again for the third time, I reached out and opened the air vent. The cool night air streamed in from over the bonnet and into the cabin and refreshed me. Besides me, my wife coughed quietly in her sleep. I lifted the cardigan which had slipped and pulled it back over her folded arms. The winding road became narrower and narrower the further I drove, and I was beginning to wish I had looked at the map the moment I was directed off for the main road by the workman. I switched on my fog lights and slowed down, as the midnight mist seemed to be getting thicker. I'd never seen fog this dense before, and if I hadn't known it, I would have sworn I was lost in the midst of some remote woodland surrounded by freezing fog that was rolling off some unseen, shimmering, moonlit lake. As I steered the crooked road with its crooked trees, twisted branches appeared to reach out from the misty gloom and into the road itself, like the knobbly fingers of some ancient woodland beast. I sped up a little, not wanting to be caught up in those grasping hands of the forest, until suddenly upon me was a small junction with an island in the shape of a triangle. I stopped the car and sat there for a moment with my foot on the brake. I squinted out of the windscreen at a small and sagging wooden signpost in the middle of the island. I couldn't quite make out what it said, so I decided to get out and read it properly. But before I applied the handbrake, I lifted my foot from the main brake, and unexpectedly, the car gave a small squeak and gently started to roll forwards. As I peered back out of the windscreen, it appeared as if the car was actually rolling uphill towards the adjacent road. I reapplied the foot brake, and the car stopped. We were definitely moving upwards. Again I lifted my foot, and once more the car began to roll. Then quite gently, it stopped. I turned to look out of the rear window, and on seeing nothing, I tentatively peered out of the others. There was nothing to be seen, just the untelling fog that swam about us with a dense calm. I paused for a moment, but it was no good. The curiosity was too much. I had to get out. Finally applying the handbrake, I opened the door, got out and wandered to the back of the car. Just able to see through the thickness, I tilted my head and looked between the road and the leaf-strewn bank. It was amazing. It really did look as if the car had rolled up the road. It was the best illusion I had ever witnessed. An owl hooted somewhere in the unseen, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. At that same moment, I began to feel the hairs on the back of my neck prickle, and I peered about behind me with the strangest of feelings. Once the rustling of leaves appeared to whisper by my side, it confirmed my growing fear, and I closed my eyes briefly, wary of what may come. I am not one for becoming spooked very easily, but on this occasion, an inner sense told me that I was not alone. A sudden flickering of white light distracted me, and I turned, looking through the trees to see the oncoming headlights of another car. Then within seconds he was screeching around the same blind bend that I had just driven. He was driving ludicrously fast given the current weather conditions, and I thought it must have been driven by a gang of reckless teenagers. As half predicted, the driver mounted the corner of the bend and swerved right across the path to where my car had just been resting. It righted itself with a squeal of rubber on tarmac before driving blindly off and into the distance. The rumble of bass from the music system seemed to reverberate mockingly in its wake. I walked carefully back along the road to where I first stopped my car. It really was very cold, and I could feel the chill biting at my tired body through my thin shirt. and I suddenly realized that my heart was beating much harder than I would have expected. Then a thought hit me. If my car had not suddenly rolled forwards when it did, there would have been an almighty accident. A wave of sickness rippled through me. I gave a sigh of relief, my hot breath forming as one in the cool night's air like some lazy cloud. I looked back to my new car with its shiny British Racing green metallic paint. It looked barely visible in the distant glow of the moonlight. A spell of serendipity had looked over us, it seemed. A faint red glow of colour from the brake lights of the other car gently washed the back of my own, and something at the rear caught my eye. As I got closer, I knelt down and saw something incredible. Towards the middle sat two fresh handprints, their outlines clearly marked out in the dew-soaked paintwork. A collection of moisture gathered at the bottom of one of them and formed a bead that ran down to the bumper. I stood up abruptly and turned around. I called out, "Hello?" and then waited. But no one answered. I stood there silently and looked around. There was nothing. No sights, no sounds, no movements, no nothing. Just a smooth and almost muted idling of my own car. I shivered with apprehension. Surely I would have seen someone if they had started pushing the car. But there was nothing to see, anywhere. Yet there was a someone or a something there. I could feel it. Watching. I glanced back to the old wooden signpost. It read, Lake Spinney. I'd never heard of the place before, and dare say I wouldn't even find it in daylight, let alone midnight. I walked briskly back to the car, but before I opened the driver's door I turned and looked back. "Thank you," I called out into the swirling mist, but again, nothing. I got back in and fastened my seatbelt. I gazed briefly upon the back seat of the car and then to my wife as she shivered in her sleep, undisturbed. I applied the foot brake and released the handbrake, preparing to leave. And then I saw it. It was there in the extra brightness of the brake lights, silhouetted by some trees. A figure stood there in the mist. I leaned in further toward my rear view mirror, but it did not move, and I wondered if it was just another illusion. I reached out slowly without looking and pressed the central locking button, and the doors clunked securely. Then after a brief moment, it moved. It wasn't a fast movement, it just stepped to one side and stopped, as if waiting. I lowered my window and extended my arm and gave a quick and steady wave of my hand, and then watched as the figure slowly ventured backwards into the foggy depths of the woods. I sat there and stole a moment of incredulity before deciding to finally continue my journey home. After about 5 minutes of careful driving, I eventually broke away from the foggy wood-encroached road and turned on to the main high street. Moments later, my sleepy eyelids welcomed the sight of a 24-hour lay-by cafe, its blue neon lights dazzling off of the shiny, wet road. I parked up and got out. Wearily, I approached the brightly lit, yet shabby cabin. "Hello, John," I said. "Can I just have a coffee, please?" The scruffy old man frowned. "How do you know my name, son?" he asked suspiciously. "It says John's Cafe up there," I replied, pointing up at the signage. He laughed and scratched his bald head as he shook it. "The times I forget that." The stout little man turned and began to make the drink. "Been out somewhere nice, have you, Guff?" he asked. I looked down at my shirt and tie. "Yeah, a wedding. It went rather well, actually." "Very nice," he agreed. "A late one, then?" he continued. I suppose so. I got lost around Lake Spinney and all that thick fog didn't help." Probably drove around in circles for ages. He turned with the coffee. "Now there's a place," he said, raising his eyebrows. "Wouldn't catch me there late at night, especially on a foggy night." And he lifted his milk carton. "Please," I acknowledged, and he poured some into the steaming coffee until I raised my hand to stop him. "What's the story there then?" I went on. You know, rumours, sightings, usual stuff." And he stared into the coffee as he stirred it with a stained spoon. I waited for him to answer, as he seemed to be recollecting his rusty thoughts. Finally, he spoke again. "About 40 years ago, there was took of a big accident, see? An horrible accident. On that main crossroads, right there in the middle of that lake Spinney. Anyway, there's this lethal blind bend, see? People are always moaning to the council about it. Not that they've ever done anything about it, mind. And, well, one day this guy was waiting at the junction when this speeding car from out of nowhere comes early around that blind bend, and wham! Slams right into him, killing him instantly. His car was flipped upside down like a pancake, right across that triangular piece of grass. Nasty business." And the man shook his head again. Then he slid the coffee and a small glass of sugar over towards me. "Crikey, sounds awful," I replied. "And the funny part is," he went on, "is that ever since then, every time someone waits too long on that small stretch of road late at night, rumour has it that he reappears, like an apparition, and pushes their car to safety." And he suddenly slammed his hand on the countertop, making me jump out of my skin. "What do you think of that then, eh? Spooky." I stared back at him for a moment, not knowing what to say. Spooky's not the word. Sounds more supernatural if you ask me. "Exactly," he replied, pointing at me. "But as ever, there's a lesson to be learned." And I looked up at him curiously. "Help can appear when you least expect it, sometimes when you don't even ask for it. So when you get it, you just gotta run with it, because it might not come along again." And he raised his eyebrows advisedly. "It's not always what people say, it's what they do that matters." Something about what he said made me smile. "Funny old world," I said, pondering. "Funny old world it is, my friend." And he too smiled. I got up with my coffee. "Thank you," I said, and raised my cup, and he nodded in return. I wandered back to my car and got in, placing the coffee in the drinks holder. My wife stirred again, but did not wake. I started the car and drove back onto the main road. "Are we there yet, Daddy?" said a small, tired voice from the back seat. And I glanced through the mirror at my daughter's weary eyes. "Soon, Pickle. Very soon." And rest assured, she closed her eyes and snuggled back up against her younger brother. Relieved, I sighed contentedly. Written and narrated by Stephen J. Willis. For more works by the author, go to www.stephenjwillis.com.